Before he was called the Great, he was just a boy, haunted by destiny, driven by fire, and ready to challenge the entire world. This is the story of how one young prince rose from the mountains of Macedonia to carve his name across continents and into eternity.
In the summer of 356 BCE, under the golden skies of Macedonia, a child was born whose name would echo through the ages: Alexander. His father, King Philip II, was a warrior and visionary, a man who dreamed of uniting all of Greece. His mother, Queen Olympias, was fierce, proud, and deeply spiritual. From her, Alexander inherited fire. From his father, ambition. Even as a child, he was different. He listened closely, spoke carefully, and watched everything. While other boys played, Alexander questioned the stars and the stories of Achilles and Heracles. He wanted more than glory. He wanted immortality. When he was 13, his father brought him a teacher unlike any other, Aristotle. Under the philosopher's guidance, Alexander devoured the knowledge of the world: science, logic, philosophy, poetry, politics. But Aristotle gave him something even greater: belief in reason and destiny. Years later, Alexander would say, "From my father I learned to rule, but from Aristotle I learned to live." By his late teens, Alexander was already a commander. At Chaironea, he led the Macedonian cavalry with precision beyond his years. But in the shadows of his father's triumphs, jealousy began to grow. King Philip had remarried, and whispers filled the palace. Would Alexander still inherit the throne? The tension between father and son became unbearable. Then, in the spring of 336 BCE, tragedy struck. Philip was assassinated during a grand celebration. The crowd fell silent. Within hours, Alexander, just 20 years old, was king. And with the crown came a promise to finish what his father started and more. The Greek city-states saw a young ruler and smelled weakness. They rebelled, confident he could not hold power, but they underestimated him. Alexander marched fast and struck hard. In a matter of months, he crushed the uprisings, burned Thebes to the ground, and left a message carved into the ashes. Defiance had a price. Now Greece was united, and Alexander's gaze turned east, to Persia, the greatest empire the world had ever known. In 334 BCE, with 40,000 men, he crossed the Hellespont into Asia. Before stepping onto the shore, he threw a spear into the land and declared, "Asia shall be won by the sword." At Granicus River, the first Persian satraps stood waiting. Against their towering numbers, Alexander led the charge himself, spear in hand. His horse, Bucephalus, cut through the chaos. The Persians fell, one after another. Victory, his first taste of conquest, and never his last.
From there, he moved like a storm. City after city fell under his banner. Sardis, Halicarnassus, and the entire western edge of the Persian realm. But at Issus, in 333 BCE, came the real test. Facing him was King Darius III himself, with a massive army. The Macedonians were outnumbered 3-1. Yet Alexander's mind worked like lightning. He led a feint attack, broke Darius's line, and charged straight at the Persian king. Darius fled, leaving behind his mother, wife, and daughters. Alexander, ever the enigma, treated them with respect, sending them food and comfort instead of humiliation. His message was clear. He was no barbarian. He was a ruler of the world. But conquering wasn't enough. Alexander wanted to be loved, or at least remembered. He turned south to Tyre, a fortified island city. The walls were tall, the people defiant. Most generals would have moved on, not Alexander. He ordered his men to build a causeway, stone by stone, across the sea. It took 7 months of sweat, blood, and sheer will. When the wall finally fell, Tyre burned. It was one of the greatest sieges in history, and a lesson to every city that dared to resist. Soon after, Alexander entered Egypt. To the Egyptians, he was not a conqueror, but a liberator. They crowned him pharaoh. In the desert sands, he founded a new city, Alexandria, a city that would one day become the center of the ancient world, a bridge between East and West. Standing under the Egyptian sun, Alexander began to see himself not just as a man, but as divine. But pride has a price. In 331 BCE, Darius returned with another vast army near Gaugamela. The air was thick with tension. The field stretched for miles. That night, Alexander slept calmly, as if fate itself stood on his side. The next morning, battle erupted. Dust rose, arrows rained, horses screamed. Alexander led his men through the heart of the Persian line. Darius fled once again. Persia fell. Alexander entered Babylon in triumph. The world was his. He burned Persepolis, the Persian capital. Whether in rage, revenge, or symbolism, no one truly knows. The flames that rose into the night sky marked the fall of an empire and the rise of a legend. But conquest did not bring peace. It brought paranoia. The farther east Alexander marched, the more isolated he became. His old comrades grew uneasy. His men whispered about his divine claims. In Bactria, he married Roxana, a local princess. It was both love and strategy, an attempt to unite Macedonians and Persians. But the dream of unity demanded sacrifice. One by one, old friends fell. Parmenion, his most trusted general, executed for suspected treason. Clytus, the man who once saved his life, killed by Alexander's own hand in a drunken rage. Afterwards, the great king wept. For all his victories, he could not conquer himself.
Still, he pushed onward, into India, chasing the edge of the world. At the Hydaspes River, he faced King Porus, a giant of a man who rode atop a war elephant. The battle was brutal, chaotic, and unlike any Alexander had fought before. When Porus was finally captured, Alexander asked how he wished to be treated. Porus answered, "Like a king." Alexander smiled, impressed, and returned his lands. It was one conqueror's respect for another. But his soldiers were exhausted. Years of battle had taken their toll. When he demanded to go further east, they refused. Even the greatest commander cannot march without his men. Reluctantly, Alexander turned back. He returned to Babylon, now the capital of his empire, spanning Greece, Egypt, Persia, and India. He began to plan new campaigns, to Arabia, to the edges of the earth. But fate had other plans. In June of 323 BCE, after a night of fever and exhaustion, Alexander fell ill. His voice faded, his body weakened. His generals gathered by his side, desperate to know who would inherit the world he had built. He whispered only, "To the strongest." And then, silence. Alexander was 32. In just 12 years, he had conquered most of the known world. He had never lost a battle. He had reshaped nations, cultures, and the very idea of leadership. Yet in the end, his empire would not outlive him. His generals divided it, his cities scattered across continents. But his legacy, immortal. Alexander's vision gave birth to the Hellenistic world, a fusion of Greek, Egyptian, Persian, and Indian culture. Art, science, philosophy, all carried forward because one man refused to accept the limits of his time. They called him the Great. And even now, over 2,000 years later, his name stands as the measure of ambition itself. Because Alexander didn't just conquer land, he conquered imagination. He dreamed of unity, of greatness, of eternity, and in that dream, he succeeded. History remembers kings and empires, but legends like Alexander, are eternal. He showed the world that greatness is not born from comfort, but from the courage to dream beyond the horizon.